Welcome back to another episode of That's Business. Today's guest is a former corporate tech recruiter. Jenny Lustig worked at big consulting firms like McKinsey and Accenture, as well as 2 publicly traded tech companies, but she never felt fulfilled or happy with the work she was doing. In January of 2024, she permanently gave up her 9-to-5 career to be a solopreneur, and she hasn't looked back since. These days, she helps coaches grow their businesses on LinkedIn by attracting quality clients with simple systems and strategies. Whether it's optimizing your profile, designing a compelling lead magnet, or creating a landing page that converts, she loves building lead funnels that truly help coaches go from simply surviving to thriving. Oh, Jenny, I love a good LinkedIn conversation. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Got a lot of good stuff to talk about. Now, I'm guessing you didn't grow up and say, hey, I wanted to be a recruiter, but what did you say you wanted to be when you grew up, or what was your childhood like, if you feel comfortable telling us?
Yeah, so definitely not. I mean, I think that's the story of most recruiters
Amen.
that I speak to. I mean, I know you can relate having a similar background and such. Yeah, I feel like most recruiters that I meet tend to fall into it. Like we have a lot of like zigzaggers, as I like to say, in a good way, because I think that adds a lot of depth to like what people bring to the position. But yeah, I never saw myself getting into like the people side, recruiting, HR, any of that. Just randomly happened to find a job and applied and got in that way. But yeah, you had asked about like when I was growing up, if I had, considered going in that direction. Obviously, there's no degree that you can earn specifically like recruitment side. I know there are some degrees on the HR side, but those are still fairly few and far between from what I know. But yeah, my degree was actually in fashion merchandising. So I actually started my career in corporate retail. Very different from what I transitioned into later and from what I'm doing now.
Oh my gosh. So we get into corporate retail, which I didn't know that. How many years were you into your career and you're like, I need to do something else, or this isn't it for me? Or what kind of led up to that happening?
Yeah. I mean, I had switched careers actually a few times because I went from corporate retail to getting into marketing, like on the project management side. And then I transitioned into tech recruiting later on. So I had already had my 9 lives, if you will. On the corporate side before I ever decided to transition into solopreneurship. But I think it makes you appreciate, where you've been to where you are now, kind of a situation.
And with recruiting, and you are 1000% right. It's so funny because I never was like, I want to be a recruiter. I think I found an internship and I was like, yeah, sure, I'm good at talking with people. Why not? But it is such a grind. And I have yet to meet someone that I want to be a recruiter. I knew that from day one. I've met quite a bit of people. So you are absolutely right with that. So your days of recruiting, what does it look like? Because I feel like even in today's job market, a lot of people are like, recruiters are out to screw us and we just use these robots and systems, which, as you and I know, is not true. So what were your recruiting days look like, or what was a typical day in your life like?
Well, maybe I should start out with why I got into recruiting, because I really had very positive intentions, going into it because considering that I had made so many career transitions and I had been through some tough times in terms of figuring out my own career and having some career gaps as well, that I really felt passionately about helping people to find that job that can really change their life for the better. I mean, maybe it sounds just very dreamy and cliche, but I really wanted to be that conduit to help them to get to that next level or improve their commute or get them a better salary. I just felt empowered and impassioned to help people to just really love what they were doing. And so that was why I started in the first place. Yeah, I worked in the recruiting industry for 10 years and did both agency side as well as corporate. And obviously they're very, very different. But yeah, it makes me really sad how things are with the state of recruiting in 2025. I mean, I feel like just this topic alone, we could talk about probably for days
Yes.
because it just makes me I feel so sad for both parties,
Right.
both the candidates and the recruiters of where things are at currently. On the candidate side, like I read so many Reddit threads where people are just like beyond frustrated, angry. I mean, pulling their hair out, with the number of hundreds of applications and interviews that they're going on and just not making any traction. And then on the recruiter side, I know so many good recruiters. I know of so many people who are like me, who do want to do right by candidates, but they're just so overwhelmed with the crazy inbox and volume. They're not prepared for all this AI application influx, and companies have not helped them with better technology or better systems or processes. I would say it's even gotten worse because of all the recruitment layoffs that have been happening in the last couple of years, that recruiters are so short-handed and their teams don't get funded with the technology that they often need and deserve to be able to operate efficiently. So it's just a bad news situation on all sides. And it was a big reason why I decided to leave the industry as a whole. And it sucks because it's like you want to be a change driver, but I think what really ended up getting to me is that people just automatically hated me just by my job title. It really brought me down. I was like, I really want to help you. And people didn't care. They were just like, oh, I hate you. You're evil. Just because you're a recruiter, that equals bad, and it just makes me sad all the way around, because I do want to emphasize to the listeners that there are many, many good-hearted recruiters that honestly, genuinely care and they want to help. They're just overwhelmed, exhausted, everything in between. So.
Right. And it's so true, because I say the same. You took like the perfect verbiage out of my head, because it's both parties, where you can't just walk out of the gate and hate on the recruiter or be rude to your recruiter. I mean, so many times I would call and they'd be like, who is this? I'm like, you have an attitude with me and you don't even know who I am. Like, how are you going to do with clients if it's a client facing job? So it's really interesting. And I think we got away from the whole, I don't know, do on others as you want to do unto you, or whatever the old adage is. But it's so interesting. And I do see it from both sides. I mean, at the end of the day, like, a good person's a good person. A bad person's a bad person. A good company versus bad company. Like, it's not a one size fits all. So I love that you bring that up. So navigating through that and flipping and deciding to be a solopreneur, what led up to that point of, and of course, as you're saying, like lack of technology, lack of resources, and just kind of obviously getting burnt out from recruiting. I mean, 5 years was enough for me, so I can only imagine doing 10 years. But what led up to you thinking about being a solopreneur and finally making that jump?
Yeah. So I was working in tech recruiting. I was working for a tech company in New York. And if, many of your listeners have been listening to the news and watching things closely, tech is sadly, there's tons and tons and tons of layoffs that have been happening, no signs of stopping. So I experienced a few layoffs, actually. And what happened to me was I was working in tech in New York, and I had been working for the same company for about 3 years. And our hiring had started to die down. And so I kind of started to worry a bit, because I only had a couple of open positions that we were hiring for. And that's usually a bad sign as a recruiter when your workload starts to go down, down, down. And yeah, you keep asking about hiring budgets and there's no changes happening. And so, yeah, I was affected by a layoff December of 2023. So 2 weeks before Christmas, unfortunately. And I had been affected by a layoff during COVID as well from the company I'd worked at before. So unfortunately, I was no stranger to layoffs. And I think because of my recruiting background and from having chatted with candidates on a regular basis, and them telling me their stories about, their layoffs, how challenging it was for them to find a new job. I just felt like I had a front row seat to the economy in many ways. I just felt like I had some additional knowledge that maybe the average person might not have been apprised to. And so it just kind of like flipped a switch in my brain that as soon as like my layoff happened, I did not rest that like holiday season. Like I immediately went into high gear and I was like, I am going to build something for myself. I don't trust companies anymore. I wanted to be in the driver's seat. And that was just something new for me because I never, ever pictured myself being an entrepreneurial person. I never thought about really starting a side hustle. Like that just wasn't my personality at all. Like I'm actually pretty risk averse in many capacities. Yeah, it was a total shift when I was like, yeah, I'm not going to even bother applying to jobs. I am going to figure this new solopreneur journey on my own. And it's really scary, but glad I took the leap.
That's such a huge decision to make because it's way easier to just get the corporate job, do the thing again. And especially because there's been so many people who are used to layoffs or unfortunately know the song and dance that goes into it. So that's a huge step. Now, what has been, especially kind of transitioning to talk about LinkedIn, how did you think of this idea of where you wanted to focus your business? 'Cause it's so genius, but where did that come from?
Well, thank you for saying that. I think like having been a recruiter, LinkedIn is where I felt comfortable, because when people make the transition from corporate to building their own business, usually you want to try to find that level playing field of like, where can you bring some of your backgrounds and talent and knowledge to, help you to kickstart your new journey situation. And so, yeah, I mean, I had been using LinkedIn Recruiter all day, every day for the last 10 years. And obviously what I do now is very different, but it still like gives me an extra push, I guess you would say, in terms of knowing the platform inside and out. The nice thing about LinkedIn is that one connection equals one follower. So because of my recruiting background, I was connected already with a few thousand people. And so that's kind of the game in any kind of social media platform, of course, is to build up your audience, build up your following. And so that was a big decision maker for me that I already had a leg up. I had 3,000 followers when I started last year. And I think I got 6,400. So I've been doubled that in just the past year. And that helps immensely because I had thought for a second, oh, maybe I should try YouTube and it could still be a possibility for me down the line. But you're literally starting at square zero, no followers, no knowledge, no nothing. So yeah, I wanted to start with something I knew and trusted.
And what services do you provide for clients, or what is your market value of who would want to hire you?
I focus my efforts on working with career coaches because that's obviously, a typical pivot for a recruiter or an HR person. And so I really like helping those folks to build their solo businesses and help them to attract clients. But what I do is I focus on simple systems, namely a lead funnel, because I do think a lot of what career coaches do is trying to find the right clients. A lot of them are getting massive amounts of inbound and referrals right now with so many people being on the job market. So it's great on one sense that, your inbox probably is brimming over. You have tons and tons of people coming to you, but are they really quality people? Are they really people who are going to be committed your coaching process so that way you can get them results? But I would say more importantly, can they afford your services? Obviously different career coaches charge different amounts, but I always want to position people so that way they're attracting potential clients that can afford their high ticket offers. So yeah, I help them to implement a simple system that helps them to take a cold lead to a warm lead through automation and really save them about 5 to 10 hours a week from, talking to, a lot of people that, are non-committal or can't afford their services. I want to make sure that their time and energy is spent in the right direction and talking to the right people.
That's so huge too, because of course, as you all know, I'm a career coach, but it's so interesting because you get such a wide range of people on LinkedIn where some quite literally expect it for free, which boggles my mind because I still get some of those asks or, hey, this is cheaper than I thought, or hey, this is way too overpriced. So it is hard. And it took me even probably 2 years or so to finally get it in order of like what verbiage to say, what systems to use, because it's a lot and it's so overwhelming, especially as a solopreneur, which I was at the time. Like, I don't know, what do I do with technology? I just had an IT department my whole career. Like, I don't know what to do. So what you're doing is so genius. Now, where do you see, especially with career coaches or people in general, where they're not taking advantage of LinkedIn, or where do you see like the biggest areas of opportunity using LinkedIn?
I would say one big thing is posting content. I do see a decent amount of career coaches who do post content, but many, many, many others don't, which is kind of shocking to me. And I actually wonder if that's because so many of us come from the corporate world where you're actually told that you can't post to social media. Like my last couple of companies, I had to sign legal agreements that said that I was not allowed to post or comment or do anything, just to protect the company and such. So I think people still kind of have that buried in their brains that they shouldn't be posting on social. But I think it's also still a bit of a faux pas, especially for people coming from corporate, that they feel what are people going to think of me? Oh, is this going to make me look weird or something like that? But yeah, I think content is one of the best ways to organically attract a new audience because there's so many ways that you can play it. You can have fun with it. I mean, you can post really fun and hilarious content if you want to, which, I think it's kind of a fun way to show what it might be like to work with you kind of a situation. I think people don't think that relates back to business. And it depends on how it's spun, but I think it definitely can relate back. But yeah, it's also a great way to promote your services, promote your offer, get in front of new people. Because I do think a lot of career coaches stay in their safety lane of where they really only tap into their existing network and then referrals from there. And my goodness, there's 1 billion people on LinkedIn. There's so many other people you could be connecting with and talking to. So I do think that, posting regularly, 3 to 5 times a week, can really make a difference if you're really hoping to, attract a new generation of talent into your pipeline. Another thing that I want to point out is your LinkedIn profile in terms of optimization. That is something that I believe in so strongly. And I've just learned so much over the last year about what makes for a really impactful profile, because I see a lot of coaches who really just don't explain who they serve and how they can help them. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. That sounds so obvious, but I see a lot of coaches when I visit their profiles talking in very broad generalities, that they just help executives with their resume. And I'm like, okay, what kinds of executives? Do you help tech executives? Do you help healthcare executives? Please explain, and then you help them with their resume. Well, do you coach them? Is it a done for you service? I could go on and on, but yeah, I think there's just so much lost opportunity that a lot of coaches focus on building a whole separate website when they really, in many cases, don't need to do that because the eyes and the traffic are on LinkedIn. The SEO is built in for you. So I always advocate for turning your LinkedIn profile into a landing page and optimizing it right there.
Absolutely. 100%. I swear I didn't plant Jenny on this podcast because I didn't even know we were going to get so deep into LinkedIn. But yes, 100% to everything. And it's interesting too, because going back to content and then moving forward, I get it. I was an anti-social media person before I started this business of like, I don't want to post. Nobody cares about what I have to say. Nobody cares my opinions. But that's actually like quite the opposite because we have our own behavior of the celebrities we follow, the coaches we hire, the therapists we hire. Like, I know for me, I like real people. I don't like the toxic positivity. I'm not a Tony Robbins fan. I'm not and that's fine for those that are, but I'm more of a let's be real of this stuff sucks and life is difficult and running a business. I've cried a lot, blood, sweat, and tears, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. So I think that's something that is so huge and people do care. And I love that you brought up your services are too broad because it's freaking true. And I don't know how you feel about this, but the whole like, what's your niche? I hate that terminology, but you said it perfectly of like, who do you serve or who do you help? And I know for me, it took me like, I don't know why it keeps being 2 years, but it's always 2 years with me of one day being like, I think I help people who don't know what their next step is. That's who I think I help. So, or changing your headline, which nobody I feel like knows that of your headline underneath your name is should not say just CEO of the Resume Rescue. It should say what services you offer or for SEO, what are people typing in to find you? So I love this. Now, I want to talk about some of the myths that we hear about LinkedIn, or what do you get as pushback from potential clients or leads that you talk with about LinkedIn of like, I know for me, it's nobody cares what I have to say or nobody's listening to me. So what are some of those pushbacks you get and some of those myths you love to destroy?
Yeah. People don't look at LinkedIn as a top place to find and connect with leads. I think they're just used to tapping into the network, tapping into referrals, old school. When I mentioned websites, but websites are just kind of old school at this point. I just feel like it's so darn hard to get traffic via like SEO to your site unless you have something else directing people there. People are sleeping on LinkedIn. And I just see this from two sides, like generationally. And I'm in my 40s, so but I will say I think a lot of people maybe late 30s plus, and then Gen Z. So I think people who are like early to mid 30s, they get it. Like they're on it. That's who I see who are pretty active right now on LinkedIn, to be honest. But yeah, I think that people who are like my age or older tend to, rely on more traditional channels, networking, etc. And it does still work for them in many capacities. But what I tell them is that those referrals will dry up at some point. And if you don't have a system in place to help to boost you for when those wells run dry, because they will at some point, then, it could be an uphill battle if you wait too long. And on the Gen Z side, I think Gen Z is ignoring LinkedIn entirely. I think they're so focused on the cool things like Instagram and YouTube, and it was TikTok. Who knows what's going to happen with TikTok now? But yeah, like they're just not using LinkedIn because it's just not a sexy social media channel. And that's why I think it's a total gold mine. That's why I only use LinkedIn, is because so many people on both sides of that coin are ignoring LinkedIn, that from my standpoint, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that means that my posts are going to show up in a lot of other people's feeds because there's not a lot of other people posting and contributing. So to me, it's like a straight shot to winning and getting clients. And so that's why I want to help people to get on board, because I see that light. And so I hope that maybe sparks some interest in the people who are listening today.
Well, and it's even the fact that you've tripled your close to tripled, I would say, in a year. That's huge. I mean, it takes forever. And I know I think I was 19 or 20 and they made me get LinkedIn to pass a class. I didn't care about it. I was like, oh, this is the old stuffy man business platform, but it's not at all. There's so many groups of people. I could post my freaking blue hair and people aren't going to run for the hills. Like, it's crazy. So it's changed so much. And I love what you're doing because you are just so needed. And it's only going to grow in popularity. I forgot the numbers, but I read an article like through LinkedIn of they're expected to like triple in size in the next like 3 years or add that many more users to it. So it's not going anywhere. And honestly, we're probably going to get away from resumes, or we're probably going to get away from other social media. And LinkedIn's where the money is. I work through every platform. LinkedIn is where the freaking money is, 1000%. So I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes, that's so huge, especially with just the content, or it's not going anywhere. And we really need to talk about that. So, Jenny, you have provided so much great insight. And if you want to work with Jenny, please head to the show notes, check her out. But as we wrap this up, what advice do you have for listeners?
For LinkedIn or getting into solopreneurship or
anything? Open-ended question.
I mean, I think so many people really hesitate about taking the leap from corporate life into solopreneurship. And I would like to encourage people to really think about, do you actually feel like you have a safety net by working in corporate? I stopped believing in that. And even on my most challenging days as a solopreneur, I remind myself that, even though I don't have a steady paycheck, even though I don't have corporate health insurance, which, I certainly miss, I don't feel safe by a corporation determining my future anymore. And I think it's so important to build something that you really believe in and that you're truly in the driver's seat. That's something that drives me every day, that I really believe in what I'm doing, who I'm helping, that I'm building the life that I want, and that I can make those decisions. And it's scary and exciting and terrifying all wrapped into one. Like, it's this roller coaster ride that I would wish on everyone, because I do think it's such an important experience that is so eye-opening. And so even if you just test the waters a little bit with a side hustle, like, I think 2025 is the year to go for it.
Oh, absolutely. Jenny, you have been absolutely incredible. If you're listening to this, you want to work with Jenny and improve your LinkedIn, and especially if you're a career coach and so many other things. But Jenny, you're incredible. Thank you for listening, and tune in again next week for another episode of That's Business.
If you're looking for a career change and you're not sure where to start, the Resume Rescue can help. Sure, there's no such thing as the perfect fit for everyone, but here at the Resume Rescue, we're on a mission to find the perfect solution for you. Whether it's changing careers, updating a resume, learning LinkedIn, or practicing interviewing, we have you covered. Find us online at theresumerescue.com and find all of our contact info in our show notes.